But today I come to CARSP as a member of the National Transportation Safety Board, or the NTSB. At the NTSB, we are fortunate because over 50 years ago, we were created by the US Congress as an independent agency dedicated to investigating and studying transportation disasters in order to make recommendations to prevent accidents, injuries, and deaths. The public primarily knows about our work from when we're in the media and in the news, and we are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I dressed up for you a bit today, but this is how I usually look at the scene. We're at the scene of every civil aviation accident and significant accidents in the other modes, usually in our dark blue jackets with the NTSB emblazoned on the back. Each board member has to cover all types of transportation, no matter what their background, and mine, of course, is roadway safety. For example, I covered the train derailment in Washington State in December and the helicopter crash into the East River in New York in March. And we do cover all modes of transportation, from aviation to marine to rail, pipeline, and other crashes and traffic crashes. But of course, you know that even though not the greatest amount of the NTSB's resources are placed on it, the greatest loss of life year in and year out is always on our roads. We are a truly independent agency headed by 5 independent commissioners, and we're called board members, who are appointed by whoever the president is at the time, and were confirmed by the Senate. So we serve for a fixed term regardless of what administration is in power. And our agency is unique because we are one of the few federal agencies that is independent. We're not part of any other agency, such as the Department of Transportation. We don't report to anyone, but that's so that we can make recommendations to anyone, such as federal government agencies, to state agencies, companies, associations. And as a result of that, we fiercely, fiercely protect our scientific and investigative rigor and our independence. Everything we do is transparent because we do all of our deliberations, all of our votes in open broadcast meetings in what is called the Government in the Sunshine Act. We do investigate transportation disasters immediately after they occur in all modes, land, air, and sea, and then we determine the probable cause. And we use those recommendations, we use those investigations to make these recommendations that help state and territories in the United States make progress, such as requiring airbags for vehicles, or passing impaired driving laws, or passing seatbelt laws, improving school bus design, motorcycle safety, improving safety barriers and other infrastructure design, setting standards for signage in the United States, just to name a few. But I did chuckle a little bit when I was invited here, because in many ways, we need to learn from you. In many ways, Canada is much ahead of us, so I hope that we'll get a chance to interact during this conference. So in order to have the information we need, we make these recommendations often from a single investigation. And as someone who comes from a research background, that at first was very odd to me. Our investigations are extremely thorough, though. So for major crashes, we have experts who investigate many areas, including all of these, everything from survival factors to crashworthiness to even the weather at the time. And although we differ from your TSB here in Canada, because we don't have regulatory authority, our good reputation has enabled us to successfully make recommendations for the benefit of safety through a number of ways. In addition to the investigations, we also do safety studies and we do special investigative reports. And surprisingly, despite this non-regulatory position, we've made over 14,000 safety recommendations to 2,300 recipients over the last half-century. And approximately 80% have been closed successfully, meaning that they closed them in an acceptable way, or according to our criteria. So you must be asking, why is this presentation entitled, "What's Old is New Again?" Well, it's because there are long-standing issues that we all know keep emerging, issues like speeding, occupant protection, alcohol-impaired driving, And yet we're also at the same time facing new issues and new incarnations of issues. So that's everything that is emerging: automated vehicles, new impairing substances, some of which you've heard about, such as synthetic cannabinoids. And for the United States, perhaps not so much for you, you're well-versed in this, an increasing number of bicyclists that we don't quite have enough information and resources to keep safe. So that brings us to the second half of the title, Science and Story. Science and story is a tool, and it's just a way that I've begun thinking of the work that we do. Because we're an independent agency, the NTSB can do advocacy, unlike other government agencies. And although we may not call it specifically a tool, this is a tool that we use to advance road safety at the NTSB. Since we study a single representative case, just one, we have to be quite agile, and we have to do very in-depth investigations. But it also means that we can tell a specific story to represent the hundreds or thousands of similar deaths and injuries. And sometimes we found that's more effective. Science and story, it's really a balance. It encompasses a lot of different issues. Sometimes we can use more science, and other times more story, depending on the audience and the environment. Science and story also can be mutual amplifiers, but at the base of it, as you can see, there should always be data. Science and story should always be built, as you know more than anyone, on a foundation of good data. I've enjoyed attending some of your sessions. I got in very, very late on Sunday night, really Sunday, I guess Monday morning, and I've attended some of your breakout sessions. And as I heard Dr. Prasad say so well during the Vision Zero session, assessing the credibility of evidence is not trivial. And it isn't easy. But that's why it's our obligation, all of us as road safety professionals, to evaluate the science accurately. We are the protectors of good data, and it's more important now in this environment than ever. But science alone isn't enough. Does that mean we should cast it aside? Of course not. But even though decision makers and the public and the media, they may be swayed by a story, and they often are, it's really up to us to make sure that the story is based on a foundation of good evidence. As members of CARSP, you have a reputation for rigorous science and rigorous fact-checking, no matter what field. This is truly a wonderfully diverse, multidisciplinary group. But that also means that as road safety professionals, we have a deep, deep responsibility. So we have a limited time together today, and I have a lot of slides, as Brian and Brenda know. But I'm ambitious because I want to cover a lot. I know that the NTSB can learn a lot from you, so I want to tell you as much as I can about what we do, and I hope I can offer some insights to assist you in your important work as well. So today I want to provide you with 3 examples as a glimpse into our work. First, I will talk about our speeding study. I know there will be an excellent panel after me. This is from the perspective of the NTSB. Second, our advocacy efforts related to passing the first .05 BAC law in a state in the United States, and how that tool of science and story helped that be effective. And third, our investigation into our first investigation into an automated vehicle crash of a Tesla in Florida. So starting with speeding. In addition to investigating individual crashes, the NTSB also conducts transportation safety studies. And we typically approach the issue from a broader national perspective. Our most recent study like this was adopted in July, and we issued 19 recommendations to federal government agencies, several road safety and law enforcement agencies as well, and all 50 US states. The NTSB undertook this study because, as you can see here, speeding is a common factor. The percentage of US road fatalities involving speeding has remained fairly consistent at about 30%, but the absolute number of US fatalities involving speeding has increased in the past few years, and it's about the same as the number we lose from alcohol-impaired driving. So in this study, the NTSB identified these safety issues. Speed limits, including how they're determined, data-driven enforcement, particular the quality of speeding-related crash data, automated speed enforcement, sometimes referred to as photo or radar or speed cameras, intelligent speed adaptation, which is a vehicle technology, as some of you know, and the overarching issue of national leadership. So I know that speeding, you've made it a key topic in this year's conference, and that is right. That's as it should be. As I understand it, the maximum provincial speed limits in Canada range from 90 to 120 here in BC, and in all the provinces, with most of the provinces, correct me if I'm wrong, having maximum speed limits of about 100 to 110 kilometers per hour. In the US, many speed limits are initially set by a statute, but when changing speed limits, the predominant factor, perhaps somewhat like here, is the 85th percentile. That's the 85th percentile speed of the free-flowing traffic. This method has been around for so many decades, and it's under the assumption that most drivers will choose a prudent or reasonable speed, but there isn't strong evidence within a given traffic flow that the 85th percentile speed is the safest. And the research most often cited in the United States as the basis for using this 85th percentile can have unintended consequences. If a speed limit is raised, then a new higher 85th percentile speed will often result. And the speed limit increases have been shown to have spillover effects as well. And really, this measure is dated and limited in scope because it was based on a study from the 1960s that was conducted only on rural roads. So as you can see, this can be problematic. So this is especially problematic because the number of US states that have increased their maximum speed limits in recent years. As you can see on the next 3 slides, several states have increased speed limits on segments of rural interstate highways to 80 or 85 miles per hour, which is about 129 to 136 or 37 kilometers per hour. So guidance for setting Canadian speed limits is provided in the MUC. Some of you are familiar with that, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Canada. I'm sorry, the MUTCD, MUC comes later. And it's almost identical to what we have in the United States. It emphasizes the use of this 85th percentile. But there are alternatives to using the 85th percentile. The US Federal Highway Administration makes available an expert system called US Limits 2, which more objectively takes factors other than the operating speed into account. And the safe system approach, of course, to setting speed limits, in which speed limits are driven by safety outcomes rather than operating speeds, can explicitly account for vulnerable road users and maybe especially well suited for urban areas. The second safety issue is one which I alluded to earlier, and that's the use of data-driven speed enforcement and the quality of data that impacts the effectiveness of these programs. To illustrate the inconsistencies among states, consider this example. When talking about speeding-related crashes, 2 types of speeding are generally mentioned: exceeding the speed limit and driving too fast for conditions. This is how speeding usually shows up in literature, how it's coded in national crash databases maintained by NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and what's recommended now in the MUC, the Model Minimum Uniform Crash Criteria Guideline. At the national level, these 2 types of speeding, shown here in red and dark orange, appear with similar frequency in fatal crashes. However, not all US states follow the MUC. As a result, in some states, shown in orange and red here, nearly all of the speeding-related crashes are coded as exceeding the speed limits, whereas in other states, shown in white and yellow, nearly all the speeding crashes are coded as too fast for conditions, or just generic speeding. So these inconsistencies make it difficult to appropriately target countermeasures to the type of speeding that's occurring. I'm speaking very fast, but I really want to get through these slides. Speaking of effective countermeasures, Automated speed enforcement, ASE, is highly effective, but it's also controversial. Many research studies have shown, and several systematic reviews, that ASE not only reduces speeding, but significantly reduces crashes and injuries and fatalities. And in the US, the DOT gives ASE their highest effectiveness rating. And in fact, the first ASE program started in the 80s. There was a lot of growth in the early 2000s, but the growth has really stagnated in the past few years. And ASE is only used in 15 states and DC currently. I don't think ASE is very widespread in Canada, but I did read that it's used in several Canadian provinces, including some schools and roads in Saskatchewan and the cities of Edmonton and Calgary. And most of these systems, of your system, seem to operate under the same rules as operate in, for example, the states of Maryland or the District of Columbia, in which the speeding violation is issued to the owner of the vehicle rather than the driver. And that approach has been shown to be effective. I know that in May of last year, the Ontario legislature passed some legislation to use ASE in school zones. And Ontario previously used ASE for a short time in '94, but stopped after I think the election of a new provincial premier in '95. So there have been many cases where it has been used and stopped, here in British Columbia as well. Apparently it was ended because it was unpopular with the drivers, although safety-wise it was quite effective, with 17% reduction in daytime traffic fatalities and a 25% reduction in daytime speeding-related collisions province-wide here in BC. So we actually included that study, your study, in our speeding report, and it was part of a bigger review that DOT did as well. But it seems that here in Canada, ASE has been the subject of the same complaints as in the US, and that's that the complaint is that they're used to raise revenue rather than increasing safety. So in speaking with stakeholders, including state and local transportation departments, the NTSB found that one of the greatest obstacles to having ASE was the lack of enabling legislation at the state level. Even in states where ASE isn't specifically prohibited, communities aren't willing to start ASE programs without this type of enabling legislation in place. And one of the ways to do that is to adhere to best practices. But the US guidelines are outdated and not well known. In fact, 2/3 of the administrators didn't know that there were even guidelines. And we also looked at point-to-point enforcement, which is called average speed enforcement. And I don't think it's currently used in Canada, but there was this newspaper article earlier this year suggesting that mayors in 2 BC communities are advocating for its use. So this type of speed enforcement is based on a vehicle's average speed between 2 points rather than the instantaneous speed. It hasn't been used in the US, but it's been shown to be effective in other countries, and it has some advantages over that single point system in that drivers are encouraged to drive the speed limit over longer distances, and it addresses the problem of drivers knowing exactly where the fixed cameras are. And in the US, of course, there are privacy concerns, as well as the same concerns about traditional photo enforcement, because it violates what's called the confrontation clause of different states' state constitutions. That's why some US states do not even allow photo enforcement of any type unless there's an officer present that you can confront if you're speeding. Doesn't always make sense what we do, does it? So the NTSB also considered vehicle technologies, and one such technology is Intelligent Speed Adaptation, or ISA, which limits a vehicle to the current speed limit. And very few ISA systems are available, at least in the United States, but it's common, it's not uncommon, in European markets. And auto manufacturers told us that it was because ISA is included in Euro NCAP, and it's not part of any of the US NCAP safety ratings. So lastly, the NTSB considered the overarching issue of national leadership. And there are few negative social consequences to speeding. There's very few there are no nationwide programs in the US related to speeding. And as you know, Canada's Road Safety Strategy 2025 does list speed and aggressive drivers as one of 9 key factors, but we don't have that in the United States. As a result of the speeding study that we spent so much time for, we issued these 19 recommendations, which I will show you here. All of this is publicly available. You're welcome to have any of this. And so we're slowly trying to follow up on all of these recommendations. And when we issue a recommendation at the NTSB, the recipients are required to respond within 90 days. So it's been more than 90 days. And unfortunately, even though they're all still open, there are challenges. Only 7 states have responded to the automated enforcement recommendation, and only 1, surprisingly Kentucky, has even committed to doing anything concrete, and that was to look at the recommendations for a pilot program in school zones and work zones. We were also very disappointed by NHTSA's response. And it looks like we're picking on NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, but they did receive the most recommendations here. And NHTSA is limited by a prohibition by the US Congress on states, because states cannot use federal funds for any type of automated speed enforcement currently in the United States. So as you can see, we do face some challenges. I'm going to move on. There's more information you can find on our website, and these are the 2 lead authors, and they would be delighted to talk with you and learn more from Canada. So at the NTSB and here at CARSP, and likely any organization that you belong to, we often talk about data and science and evidence, but we don't often talk about the stories behind them. We don't talk about the stories that will help people understand the science and the importance of it. So at the NTSB, we study single representative crashes, but my own training was really about the completely opposite side of the spectrum. Data, lots and lots of data, thousands of cases, preferably. And in the 1990s, I was immersed in the world of systematic reviews, first at the Cochrane Collaboration and then at the CDC, the Guide to Community Preventive Services. The Cochrane Collaboration, as you may or may not know, was named after Archie Cochrane, who was a physician. You probably all know what a systematic review is now, and they're commonly now known as the gold standard. But when I was starting to do them, they were fairly unknown outside the world of medicine. And so I did publish one of the first systematic reviews on an injury topic in the US, focusing on injuries related to alcohol. So to give you that background, I go from there to going to a place where we're looking at one single case. And I love data. So I love the idea that a systematic review would find the answer. It would quantitatively tell us what's happening. And I just couldn't understand why other people didn't find the results of a meta-analysis as fascinating as I did. But it was really in my past 3 or 4 years at the NTSB where I saw the immediate and terrible aftermath of transportation disasters. And I also saw the power of this one story of one crash and how that could have an immense effect on policy, as much as that really went against my training and background. And so now I've become convinced of the absolute necessity of telling the story that supports the data in order to save lives and prevent injuries. And that is what happened most recently in the state of Utah in the US when they considered a measure to reduce alcohol-impaired driving last year. We've discussed cannabis very thoroughly, it seems like, in this conference, and that is certainly important. It's a very important issue that I know all of you are facing in your provinces, and we're facing as well in our states, as Darren Grundell told you. And the NTSB has investigated crashes where many different types of impairing substances have been involved, involving cannabis, synthetic cannabinoids, opioids, prescription medications, and many other types of substances. And while the US and Canada here that the fact that alcohol-impaired crashes may not get as much attention as they should. I hope we'll remember that only 27 or 28% of deaths is still thousands of people. In the United States, that is 10,000 people who die in recorded alcohol-impaired driving crashes every year. As you can see here, we have recommended many different types of recommendations related to reducing impaired driving in the US because it's such a difficult issue. We made all these recommendations as part of our Reaching Zero study, but we always get the most criticism, not for any of these other ones, but for recommending 0.05 BAC or lower. I know you're much more progressive than we are, so you're already enacting that in some of your jurisdictions. So I try to be an optimist, but even I was surprised last year when, against very high odds, and during a short legislative session of 45 days, the state of Utah passed the United States' first 0.05 BAC law. So how did it happen? In part because the people in Utah requested safety information from the NTSB, and we were able to provide it. When Utah legislators reached out to me and their law enforcement reached out to me, we provided unbiased information, and I testified twice before their state legislature. We gave them information about 0.05, about how it's a broad deterrent, about how it lowers BAC drivers from getting behind the wheel at all levels of BAC. We showed them studies demonstrating that even at a 0.05 BAC, people have problems with steering and vision and coordination. I had a lot of critics. People can be very rude in the United States, as you know. And so critics called me unpatriotic, a prohibitionist. So we told them that 0.05 was not about drinking at all. It was about simply separating drinking from driving. We said, choose one, drink or drive. And we told them over and over again that it would save 1,790 lives in the nation every year. But there are always opponents of safety, and opponents of this law use scare tactics and spread misinformation through very expensive full-page newspaper ads in many newspapers. These ads contradicted information from NTSB, from NHTSA, from the National Academies of Science, yet these ads told a story, a false story, but a story, a compelling story nonetheless. Opponents tried to mislead Utah residents with a story about innocent people getting put in jail after having had one drink with dinner. And I have to admit, they were provocative. They highlighted older lawmakers and questioned their ability to drive, or had catchy slogans like, arrive on vacation, leave on probation. So we provided stacks of information and studies to legislators, to the governor, to anyone who would ask. And I thought surely the statistic of 1,790 lives a year would be all that was needed. But no, in the end, although our statistics helped, it was the power of the story that prevailed. My first op-ed, this one, was full of numbers. I described my brother, a doctor, who often visited Utah with his family to snowboard. I wrote that by passing a 0.05 BAC law, Utah would be taking the first step to saving 1,790 lives worldwide. And I thank them for protecting their families and mine. I can't tell you how many comments I received about that story about your brother. And even more importantly, because of that, supporters of 0.05 BAC started coming out and showing up at hearings with their own story and citing NTSB facts. So the NTSB provided solid, accurate, independent safety information for people to make informed decisions, and we helped them tell their story. And that's what did it in Utah. Now, I know I guess I have a little more time than I thought, right, Brian? Because I have 5 minutes. I know you want to ask questions as well. So automated vehicles, everyone, this is a hot topic. Everyone wants to talk about that. In May of 2016, a Tesla Model S 2015 model, an all-electric passenger vehicle with certain automated vehicle control features, struck the right side of a left-turning 53-foot semi-trailer, which was a combination vehicle with a Freightliner truck tractor. The collision occurred on U.S. highway, a highway west of Williston, Florida, and the Tesla was traveling eastbound in the right lane and struck the combination vehicle as it was turning, making a left turn. The Tesla passed underneath the semi-trailer, sheared off the roof, and continued eastward and departed the right side of the road, and it continued and came to rest in the front yard of a private residence. The Tesla, when it struck the right side, it was near its midpoint, and there was some structural damage, but as you can see, the semi-trailer was not too damaged and was functional. In addition, though, to the Tesla's roof being sheared off, when it struck the utility pole, it was damaged in the left front corner, and the front airbags were also deployed. The safety issues we found were these: operational design, monitoring of driver engagement, event data recorders, safety metrics and exposure data, and vehicle-to-vehicle communication requirements. And I'm going to go a little bit more quickly through this, but Autopilot consists of traffic-aware cruise control, which is TACC or TAC, auto steer, and auto lane change. And it's an adaptive cruise control system that provides automatic longitudinal control. But the system has its limitations. They have reduced operational capacity on roads with abrupt geometry and during inclement weather, for example. And there are also restrictions that limit the functionality of the systems. The Tesla's automation system, as well as other automation systems, have this operational design domain. That is, conditions in which that system is designed to operate, but it was not based on the type of roadway. So Tesla did provide some user-based constraints to restrict the use of Autopilot to roadways for which it was designed. And drivers are informed through the vehicle manual, but the implementation of these constraints relies on the driver's awareness of them and their adherence to them. So level 2 automated systems, which was what this was, have more operational design limitations. That is, they have reduced capabilities compared to level 3 or higher. Yet there's no requirements or guidelines that limit the use of these level 2 automated systems to the roadways for which they were designed. And an automated system that does not automatically restrict its operation to conditions for which it's designed, it allows a driver an opportunity to inappropriately use the system, and unfortunately, in this case, it ended in a tragedy. As you can see here, there were auditory alerts. The crash trip lasted 41 minutes. Autopilot was engaged for 37 minutes, but the driver's hands and the vehicle judges the torque was only on the steering wheel for a total of 25 seconds. And the system allowed that. So the Tesla's Autopilot did not respond to the truck, but the system didn't detect the hazard, but it wasn't designed to. And the speed wasn't reduced, the forward collision warning and the AEB did not activate. So this is where we got a lot of our information. We're known for the black boxes, but they're not always black, as you can see. And although the unit was damaged, the SD card was functional and the data was recovered, so we were able to get this information. But as you can see, it was the lack of response prior to the crash and the lack of handling of the steering wheel. It indicated an over-reliance on automation. And the monitoring of the steering wheel torque as a method of ensuring driver engagement was clearly ineffective. So these crashes are a cautionary tale not to rely on silver bullets, at least not yet. And as we heard yesterday, it may be a while, many years, before we'll have fully autonomous vehicles in the majority of our traffic. But this reminds us that even as we encourage game-changing, cutting-edge technology like fully automated vehicles, we can't forget about other near-term life-saving solutions that you all know so well: airbags, pedestrian protection, collision avoidance, seatbelts, vital technology that we already have today and that we continue to use. And of course, let's not forget about infrastructure and legislative and other solutions inherent in the Vision Zero work that you do every day. The story of the fully automated self-driving car that never crashes is very compelling. But I can't I hope it's not the only story that people hear. They also need to hear the stories about current technology that's protecting lives every day and new paradigms of saving lives by reducing exposure to traffic, as we heard about yesterday from Todd Littman. So I hope this brief glimpse into our work will encourage you to stay in touch and share your findings and your work with us. We would always welcome you at the NTSB, especially smart people like you from Canada, to come to our labs, come to our headquarters, and share information. We have other products as well, many related to the work you do, such as pedestrian safety, single-unit trucks. We're conducting rear seats, bicycle, investigation, school buses, a special investigation study, and many others. We also have a most wanted list, which are transportation issues we hope to advance with a few good pushes. Your scientific and technical work gives you legitimacy, and it gives legitimacy to what you say. Your stories show your humanity so that people will remember what you do with your work. Real-life stories are information that people will remember. Stories give power to the data that we're generating to overcome incorrect and misleading information. It's hard for us to believe sometimes, but people need road safety professionals like us. They need us to present the data and tell the story. Science alone can't do it, story alone can't do it, but together they are a more powerful force than the sum of their parts. That's the synergy, that's the amplification, that's the balance of science and story. As researchers, as engineers, psychologists, as any of us, people who believe in data and evidence, it's our job to tell the story of data, to make the data memorable, and to make people feel something about the data. I know we don't usually talk about feelings in these professional meetings, but I think it's worth remembering what the great writer Maya Angelou said. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And we can make people feel something about accurate data and science using stories, and perhaps they will be inspired to support worthy efforts, such as what all of you are conducting. Stories are what will inspire people to remember the science. Stories bring the humanity to the data. We can advance transportation safety if we use both science and story. So please, don't hesitate. I'm always around to contact me or my colleague. I'm sorry John didn't know I was going to put his picture here, but I wanted you to know what he looks like. He's right over there. And thank you for... I snuck that in. Thank you for inviting me to speak here in Canada and at CARSP, and thank you for the important work you do every day to advance the science of road safety.